Why the station's most dangerous man drinks terrible tea is a matter of heated debate in the lower sectors, but honestly, the answer is boringly physiological. Vance needed the heat. After 40 years in the void, the cold gets into your marrow, and no amount of climate control ever really digs it out. So he sat there, nursing a mug of synthetic Earl Grey that tasted faintly of recycled engine coolant, trying very hard to look like a piece of the furniture. He was doing a decent job of it too, until the bell above the door chimed with a frequency that made his molars ache. She glided in like a stray beam of moonlight caught in a trash compactor. Lady Zelia. You didn't need to know royal heraldry to see she didn't belong in a dive where the menu was sticky. Her carapace was polished to a pearlescent sheen, shifting from lavender to soft teal with every breath, and her movements were so fluid they made the rest of the patrons look like stop-motion animations. Vance sighed into his mug. He knew that look. It was the look of someone who had read a file, panicked, and decided to come anyway. She hunted the galaxy's deadliest human, just to talk. That was the rumor anyway. Vance just hoped she'd get the wrong table. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was a harmonic vibration that seemed to bypass his ears and hum directly against his ribcage. "Are you the one they call the anchor?" Vance didn't look up. "I'm retired, lady. I fix hydroponic pumps now. Unless your azaleas are wilting, I'm not your guy." "I am not here for gardening," Xylia said, stepping closer. The air around her cooled instantly, a result of her species' endothermic biology reacting to his radiating body heat. To her, standing next to Vance must have felt like standing next to an open furnace. To him, she felt like a pleasant breeze. "I am here because I have been told that Terrans possess a unique capacity for irrational preservation." Vance finally looked up. His eyes were dark, heavy with the kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't touch. "Look, Your Highness, and don't tell me you aren't. I can smell the expensive polish from here. I'm just trying to finish my tea." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But before Zelia could press her point, the universe decided to interrupt. A maintenance drone, a hovering disk about the size of a dinner plate, suddenly whined in the corner. It was an older model, the kind with rusted servos and a bad attitude. It sparked. It let out a mechanical shriek and careened off its patrol path, diving straight toward the table where a local shopkeeper's toddler was playing with a spoon. Vance didn't think. Thinking takes time, and humans, for all their squishy fragility, are built for speed when the adrenaline hits. In one motion, he was out of his chair. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't shout. He simply interposed his mass between the drone and the child. He caught the malfunctioning machine midair with one hand, his fingers closing around the spinning metal casing. The drone's rotors ground against his palm, shredding skin, but he didn't flinch. He just squeezed. There was a crunch of metal, a final spark, and silence. Vance looked at the drone, then at the wide-eyed toddler, and finally at Zelia, who had pressed herself against the wall. Her scales flared in a display of sheer biological panic. "Sorry," Vance muttered, tossing the smoking scrap onto an empty table. "Glitchy wiring. These older models get confused by the calf lights." He grabbed a napkin and wiped a smear of oil, and a little blood, off his hand, completely ignoring the fact that he had just crushed industrial-grade alloy with his grip. He turned to the toddler, his voice dropping an octave, softening into that strange, rumbling coo that humans do. "You okay, little bit? Scary noise, huh?" The toddler giggled. Vance smirked, a crooked, gentle thing that didn't match the violence of his hands. Zelia watched him, her dual hearts hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had studied the vids. She knew the statistics. But seeing it, feeling the displacement of air as he moved, sensing the sudden spike of thermal energy radiating from him, was terrifying. And yet, he wasn't posturing. He wasn't demanding tribute for the rescue. He was checking the child for scratches. It was the most baffling thing she had ever witnessed. Vance turned back to her, catching the look on her face. He misread it entirely. Oh, relax. It wasn't an attack. Just a busted servo. Nobody's trying to assassinate you in a tea shop. He reached out, perhaps instinctively, to guide her away from the broken glass on the floor. His hand, heavy and impossibly warm, landed on her shoulder. For Vance, it was a casual gesture, a reassurance. I got you. You're safe. For Xylia, it was a sensory supernova. The heat of his palm seeped through her carapace, a shocking, grounding warmth that silenced her racing thoughts. It was heavy, yes, but it didn't crush. It felt tethering, like being held by gravity itself. You are injured, she whispered, staring at the small cut on his hand. Paper cut, Vance grunted, pulling his hand back, suddenly self-conscious of the contact. I'm fine. Humans leak easy, but we patch up fast. He really didn't get it. He had no idea that to her, the durability he just shrugged off was the stuff of Leviathan myths. He just wanted to finish his tea. Come on, Vance sighed, seeing she wasn't going to leave. Let's get out of here before the owner tries to charge me for the drone. I know a place by the hangars. Less flying debris. He walked past her, opening the door and holding it, waiting. Celia hesitated. Every instinct she had, every survival protocol bred into her lineage, screamed that this creature was a predator. He was too fast, too strong, or too hot, but he had stopped the machine to save a child, and he was holding the door. She stepped through, the warmth of his proximity making her shiver, not with cold, but with something she couldn't quite name. The place by the hangars turned out to be a structural dead zone between the cargo bays, where the artificial gravity hummed a little too loud, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and wet dirt. It wasn't a tactical bunker. It was a garden. Well, calling it a garden was generous. It was a collection of repurposed fuel canisters cut in half, filled with smuggled soil and hosting a defiant array of tomatoes and basil. Under the harsh industrial lighting, the green leaves looked impossibly vibrant, an alien invasion of chlorophyll in a world of gray steel. You grow food? Celia asked, her voice hitching. She hovered near a basil plant, afraid to touch it. In her court, vegetation was decorative, bioengineered for symmetry. This was messy. It was chaotic. It smelled like life. I try, Vance muttered, leaning against a crate. He looked out of place here, a scarred mountain of a man next to fragile seedlings. Truth is, I just miss the smell. Recycled air tastes like, well, it tastes like math. This tastes like home. He didn't look like a warrior then. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had carried too much for too long and just wanted to watch something grow instead of watching it burn. Xylia watched him, really watched him, for the first time. The files called him a weapon. The reports listed his kill count. But standing there, gently pinching a dead leaf off a tomato vine with fingers that could crush alloy, he seemed less like a weapon and more like a dam holding back a flood. Why? She asked softly. Why what? Why catch the drone? Why bring me here? You know who I am. You know the bounty hunters behind me. Vance shrugged, a heavy roll of his shoulders. You looked cold. It was such a stupid, simple human answer. It defied all logic of self-preservation. And before Xylia could parse the absurdity of it, the air in the hangar changed. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure drop, the static charge of a capacitor charging up. Vance felt it in his teeth. Celia felt it in her antennae. Get down! Vance didn't reach for a gun. There was no time. The assassin, a shadow distorted by active camouflage near the airlock, raised a disruptor gauntlet. It wasn't a bullet. It was a wide-area EMP burst, designed to scramble delicate nervous systems and fry electronics. For a human, it would result in a bad headache. For Xylia, whose biology relied on bioelectric pulses to regulate her core temperature, it was a death sentence. Vance moved with that terrifying blur-like speed again. But he didn't run at the assassin. He ran at her. He tackled her. It wasn't a graceful maneuver. It was a collision of mass. He slammed into her, driving her to the ground behind the cover of the heavy fuel canisters, curling his massive frame around her like a protective shell. He tucked her head against his chest, covering her auditory receptors with his hands, effectively burying her in the fortress of his own body. The EMP detonated. A silent, invisible wave of energy washed over them. The lights in the hangar blew out instantly, on showering sparks in the darkness. The gravity generator groaned and died, leaving them weightless for a split second before the backups kicked in. In the dark, Zelia didn't feel the blast. She felt him. She felt the erratic, thundering drum of his single, massive heart against her ear. She felt the incredible heat of his skin, acting as a thermal blanket, shielding her from the sudden chill of the dead station. He was a wall of muscle and stubborn biological heat, absorbing the radiation that should have stopped her hearts. Vance grunted, his muscles tensing as the residual static popped against his back, stinging like 1,000 bees. He didn't let go. "Stay down," he breathed, his voice a rumble in his chest that vibrated through her entire skeleton. "Just hang on." Silence stretched out. The assassin, realizing their tech-killing weapon had failed to neutralize the analog brute covering the target, had likely fled before the station's hard light security grid rebooted. Slowly, the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the hangar in a soft amber glow. Vance didn't move immediately. He waited, listening to the settle of dust, the distant whine of alarms. Only when he was sure, absolutely sure, did he shift his weight, groaning as he pushed himself up on one arm. "You okay?" he asked, looking down at her. His nose was bleeding slightly, a side effect of the pressure wave. Zelia lay there, pinned between the cold floor and the furnace of his body. She should have been terrified. She was a royal heir, and he was a dirty, retired soldier who had just thrown her into the dirt. But her hearts were beating in sync with his. "I am functional," and she whispered. Her scales, usually a cool teal, were flushed a deep rosy violet, a reaction to the heat transfer, or perhaps something else. Vance rolled off her, sitting back against the crate of tomatoes. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand and sighed, looking at the darkness where the assassin had been. "Rough day," he muttered. "I'm gonna need more tea." Celia sat up, dusting off her robes. She looked at the man who had hunted the galaxy's nightmares, only to retire to a life of fixing pumps and saving princesses from static shock. The princess knew his secret before he threw the first punch, but now she understood it. He wasn't the anchor because he held the line. He was the anchor because he kept things from drifting away. She smoothed her carapace and looked at him, a small, genuine smile breaking the regal mask she had worn for cycles. "I believe, Vance," she said, her voice sounding strangely warm in the cooling air, "that I will join you. But perhaps we can find a blend that does not taste like coolant." Vance looked at her, then down at his bruised knuckles, and finally he smiled back. It was a real smile this time. "Yeah," he said, offering her a hand up. "I'd like that. Humans are space moms. They just have really heavy hands."